Look, you've probably spent hours staring at headlines that make your blood boil. Like the fact that in 2021, Elon Musk paid a literal $0 in federal income tax. Or watching Jeff Bezos float by on a $500 million super yacht, completely tax-free. They didn't break the law and they didn't hide cash in offshore suitcases. They just used a highly specific bank loophole called buy, borrow, die. They take a $0 salary, borrow millions against their stock, and completely bypass the IRS. Meanwhile, you are losing 30% of your paycheck before you can even buy groceries. You're the one paying for the roads while the guys owning the skyline play by a different set of rules. So you decide right then and there, you are completely done being the sucker in this rigged game. You watch the breakdown videos, see the strategy, and decide to take massive action. You figure, if the blueprint is out there, why the hell shouldn't you use it? You walk straight up to the grandest bank in the city to execute the billionaire playbook. You walk right past the regular ATM line, because ATMs are for retail taxpayers. You sit down across from a loan officer, give her a bright smile, and get straight to business. You tell her, I want a $200,000 line of credit to buy a supercar today. She does what all bankers do. She asks for your pay stubs, tax returns, and job history. You stop her right there and say, no, we're skipping the income tax trap. I'm doing the Musk strategy. You tell her you want to borrow strictly against your assets so the government can't touch a dime. She stops typing, looks over the rim of her glasses, and asks you one simple question. That's a great strategy, but where exactly are the millions in assets you're borrowing against? You look down at your portfolio. You have 12 shares of an index fund and $50 in crypto. The bank doesn't see a visionary billionaire. They just see a massive financial liability. You walk out onto the street without a supercar contract, feeling the cold sting of reality. That's when you realize the first brutal truth. The internet gurus always forget to mention the gatekeeper. To borrow money like the top 1%, you actually have to be part of the top 1% first. For a second, you think about just throwing in the towel and going back to the daily grind, but then you think, wait, if I can't borrow like them yet, I can still structure my life like them. You realize the real secret isn't just the loans. It's the corporate shields they build around themselves. You stay up until 2 a.m. researching the magical world of corporate shell companies. You discover how wealthy people use legal entities to turn personal expenses into business deductions. You whisper to yourself, if the system is rigged, I'm just going to have to rig my own life. The next morning, you officially register your very first personal LLC online. You are no longer just an employee. You are now the CEO of a global enterprise. You immediately go out for a steak dinner, paying for it entirely with your new business card. In your mind, this isn't a luxury dinner anymore. This is a mandatory corporate meeting with yourself. You start putting your gas, your internet bill, and even your morning coffee onto the company tab. You feel like an absolute genius watching your personal taxable income drop down to almost nothing. You even try to figure out a way to claim your entire apartment rent as a corporate warehouse expense. But right when you think you have completely beaten the system, reality knocks on your door. You open a letter that instantly makes your stomach drop. The IRS is launching a full audit on your new business. You stand there staring at a piece of paper that feels like a physical punch to the gut. Your mind races through every single receipt you ran through that business account over the last 3 months. Suddenly, that corporate steak dinner you had last week doesn't taste so good anymore. You've got exactly 48 hours before a real federal auditor shows up to inspect your corporate headquarters. You frantically try to turn a messy one-bedroom apartment into looking like a legitimate tech startup. The doorbell rings right on time, and you feel your heart drop straight into your shoes. Enter Agent Miller, a guy who looks like he hasn't smiled a single time since 2012. You offer a sweaty handshake and try your absolute best to act like you have nothing to hide. He doesn't waste any time on friendly small talk. He just spreads out a mountain of your bank statements. He points his pen directly at the daily line items for your morning artisan coffees. You immediately jump in, claiming those double-shot lattes were essential for mandatory market research. He looks at you with dead eyes and tells you a business expense must be ordinary and necessary, not your personal breakfast. Then he pulls up the exact receipt for that high-end steak dinner you claimed was a critical board meeting. You argue that as the sole director of the LLC, you had to discuss long-term corporate scaling with yourself. He just sighs, because he's already heard this exact internet tax defense 1,000 times this month. He tells you the cold, hard truth. The government doesn't care about your corporate title if your business has zero revenue. If a company only loses money and only funds your daily lifestyle, they don't call it a business. They call it a hobby. And trying to write off a personal hobby to completely wipe out your tax bill is a fast track to massive fraud penalties. You feel the entire trap closing in, realizing your genius corporate loophole was just a shortcut to a massive fine. But right before he writes down the final penalty figure, you ask the one question that's been burning in your brain. You ask him why Jeff Bezos gets to write off a private jet, while you can't even write off a simple cup of coffee. He actually chuckles, packs his pen away, and decides to give you a real education on how the world works. He explains that billionaires like Bezos aren't actually writing off their personal lives. They are using depreciation. This is the core of the asset illusion that completely trips up almost every single amateur investor on the internet. When a real megacorporation buys a physical asset, like a warehouse, a truck, or machinery, it naturally wears out over time. The tax code allows a real business to claim that drop in value as a paper expense to lower their taxable income. The ultra-rich don't spend their own cash. They use the massive active cash flow of giant operations to shield their wealth. But you don't actually have an operating business yet. You just have a personal checking account and a dream. He hits you with a heavily reduced penalty, realizing you're just an everyday guy who fell for a viral internet meme. You're left sitting alone in your quiet room, staring down at a $3,000 penalty notice. You pay the fine, but instead of throwing in the towel, the failure changes something deep inside your brain. You finally realize that you absolutely cannot fake the financial system from the bottom up. If you want to play the money game like the top 1%, you have to actually build what they have: true equity. You stop looking for cheap expenditure hacks and start looking at how to accumulate actual income-producing assets. You realize the real tax advantages don't kick in when you spend money. They kick in when you own the production. You pivot your entire strategy toward building a legitimate, cash-flowing business structure completely from scratch. No more fake corporate board meetings with yourself. You start chasing real customers, real revenue, and real value. Because the ultimate secret of the wealthy isn't that they avoid taxes. It's that they control the assets that make the rules. You step back out into the world, completely done looking for shortcuts, and ready to build the real thing. And that exact shift in mindset is where your real financial journey actually begins. You stop looking for shortcuts and actually put in the grueling, unglamorous work to build something real. It takes months of absolute silence, but then the craziest thing happens. The cash actually starts rolling in. You watch your dashboard refresh, and for the first time in your life, you aren't just getting a fixed paycheck. You're generating independent, scaling revenue from a real online asset that you own completely. You finally feel like you've won the game, watching your balance grow past what your old 9-to-5 paid in a year. But right when you're about to celebrate, the next level of the financial matrix hits you right in the face. You realize that making more money doesn't solve your tax problem. It actually makes it exponentially worse. Because as a solo business owner, you are now hit with something called the self-employment tax trap. You aren't just paying normal income tax, you're paying both sides of the Social Security and Medicare taxes. You watch 15.3% of your hard-earned profit vanish before you even calculate state brackets. You realize that if you keep running this as a standard sole proprietorship, the government will absolutely bleed you dry. So you dive back into the playbook, not to cheat the system, but to finally use its actual architecture. You discover the exact structural pivot that mid-tier millionaires use to protect their cash flow, the S-Corp. You learn that you can split your business income into two completely separate buckets. First, you pay yourself a reasonable salary as an employee of your own company, which gets taxed normally, but the rest of your business profit drops into the second bucket as a corporate distribution. And here's the magic. Corporate distributions are completely exempt from that brutal 15.3% self-employment tax. You run the math on your notepad and realize this single structural shift saves you thousands of dollars legally. You officially change your tax status, realizing you're finally thinking like an actual business owner. You start to understand that the system isn't designed to punish wealth. It's designed to punish financial ignorance. Now that your base structure is secure, you look at how the top tier chains multiple entities together. You learn about the holding company strategy, where one company exists solely to own another company. The operational company takes all the risk out in the public, while the holding company quietly protects the assets. It's a legal shell game that allows the wealthy to move capital around seamlessly without triggering massive tax events. You realize you've officially transitioned from trying to look rich to actually understanding how structure creates wealth. Your business is clean, your legal entities are optimized, and your cash flow is heavily insulated. You look back at your old self, the person who tried to write off a steak dinner, and laugh at how clueless you were. True financial freedom isn't about finding a magic trick to pay $0 while making nothing. It's about building a fortress of actual assets that grow faster than inflation, and the tax code can destroy them. You lock your desk, grab your gear, and realize your entire relationship with money has permanently shifted. You walk down the street looking at the same corporate buildings from before, but with total clarity. You see the luxury cars and the penthouses not as things to envy, but as the natural byproduct of structured equity. You don't want the cheap illusion of wealth anymore. You want the cold, hard operational reality of it. You set up your workstation in a space surrounded by other serious builders and operators. You realize the game never actually ends. It just scales up as your understanding of the rules deepens. Every dollar that flows into your system now goes to work for you, instead of just funding your consumption. Because at the end of the day, you can either complain about how the top 1% plays the game, or you can finally take the time to learn the exact rules they are using to win it. The choice is entirely yours, but once you see how the machinery actually works, you can never go back. And that is exactly how you take control of your financial destiny, in a system designed to keep you asleep. Now that you ICC have a real cash-flowing asset under your holding company, your financial leverage completely shifts. You walk back into the exact same bank that rejected you months ago, but you aren't begging for a favor this time. You sit down in the private wealth department and lay out your audited corporate financial statements. Suddenly, the gatekeepers aren't looking at your personal credit score or your paycheck, they are looking at your business equity. They don't see a risky retail borrower anymore. They see an institution they can safely lend millions of dollars to. You sign your name on a massive corporate line of credit, backed entirely by the valuation of your holding company. You've officially unlocked the exact tool the top 1% uses to fund their lifestyles without triggering taxes. You can walk out tomorrow and pull money directly from that debt facility to buy whatever you want. Because a loan is not classified as taxable income by the IRS, you just generated massive purchasing power out of thin air. No capital gains tax, no personal income tax, and absolutely zero reduction in your actual company ownership shares. For the first few weeks, you feel completely untouchable, like you finally cracked the ultimate cosmic code to wealth. But here's the part of the story where the internet gurus turn off the camera because reality is about to bite back. See, the financial system gives with one hand, but it takes back with absolute mechanical ruthlessness with the other. An economic shift hits your industry, and your core business revenue drops by 30% in a single quarter. You quickly realize that while your revenue shrank, your monthly interest payments on that massive line of credit stayed exactly the same. Debt is an incredible amplifier when your asset value is exploding, but it is a lethal anchor when things start cooling down. You aren't just managing an operational business anymore. You are now managing a heavily leveraged financial ticking time bomb. Every percentage point the central bank raises interest rates directly eats into your company's remaining profit margins. And then you get hit with the most terrifying two words in the entire world of high finance: margin call. Because your asset valuation dropped below a specific threshold, the bank legally demands their money back right now. They don't care about your long-term business vision, and they don't care about your personal financial stability. If you can't cash out that loan immediately, they have the absolute legal right to seize your entire company to pay the debt. This is the brutal hidden trap of the billionaire playbook that ruins thousands of ambitious entrepreneurs every single year. You realize you made the classic rookie mistake. You used your leverage to fund your lifestyle before your foundation was bulletproof. You have exactly 72 hours to scramble, secure emergency revenue, and stabilize your corporate collateral lines. It is a brutal, agonizing lesson in real risk management that you will absolutely never forget for the rest of your life. Through pure grit, you close a major deal at the final hour, injecting enough cash flow to satisfy the bank's demands. You survive the squeeze, but the terrifying experience permanently changes the way you look at money and leverage. You realize that using debt to look rich before you are actually wealthy is just a highly sophisticated form of financial suicide. You voluntarily liquidate the luxury liabilities, using the cash to completely pay down the toxic debt balance. You choose to prioritize fortress-level stability over flashy, superficial status symbols that keep you on a knife's edge. You understand that the top 1% can play the debt game because they have endless layers of redundant safety net assets. If you try to copy their exact endgame strategies while you're still in the early stages, a single market glitch will wipe you out. You pivot your focus entirely toward accumulating robust, unleveraged cash reserves that no bank can ever call in. You learn to love retained earnings and fortress liquidity way more than you love showing off fake luxury on social media. You are no longer trying to trick the system or run a high-risk scam against your own future financial security. You are finally building real generational wealth based on actual economic value, step by painful step. And that shift from reckless speculator to calculated operator is where you finally become truly unkillable. Now it's time to look at the final, ultimate phase of the wealth game: how to permanently lock in your freedom. Once you survive the debt squeeze, you're ready to look at the absolute final step of the billionaire trilogy, the die part of buy, borrow, die. It sounds dark, but the top 1% look at mortality as the ultimate permanent tax shelter. You see, normal people leave behind a mess of inheritance taxes that bleed their family's future dry. But the ultra-wealthy use a highly specific legal mechanic called the stepped-up basis. Imagine you bought an asset for $1, and over your lifetime it grows to worth $1 million. If you sell it while you're alive, you get absolutely hammered by massive capital gains taxes. But if you hold it until the day you pass away, the tax basis instantly resets to the current market value. Your kids inherit that $1 million asset, and the IRS legally wipes away all those decades of capital gains taxes. They can sell it the very next day for $1 million and pay a grand total of $0 to the government. To make it completely untouchable, you don't even own the assets personally. Your private family trust does. You become a ghost in the financial system. You own absolutely nothing, but you control absolutely everything. That is the exact moment you realize why the rich keep getting richer while everyone else stays trapped on the treadmill. They aren't smarter than you. They are just operating an entirely different operating system. But before you can even think about that end game play, you have to fix the massive gap in your current day-to-day life. You look at your actual lifestyle expenses, realizing how easily the trap of lifestyle inflation can creep back in. The second you start making real money, the temptation to look like a billionaire will try to destroy your progress. You see people every day who look rich but are exactly one missed paycheck away from complete financial ruin. They lease the sports cars, rent the penthouses, and put their entire lives on a high-interest credit card. You choose a completely different path, the path of the silent, unshakable operator. You start funneling every single spare dollar of your corporate profit into boring, cash-flowing real estate. Real estate gives you the triple crown of wealth: steady rental income, natural appreciation, and massive tax write-offs. Through a mechanism called cost segregation, you can accelerate depreciation to wipe out your active business profits. You're finally using the exact same real estate loopholes that the biggest tycoons in the world survive on. Your wealth is no longer just digital numbers on a screen. It's anchored in real, physical brick and mortar. You watch your passive income lines slowly grow until they completely cover your entire cost of living. That is the day you achieve true financial independence, when working becomes a choice, not a survival mechanic. You don't need the flashy supercar anymore to prove your worth to a bunch of total strangers. The true flex isn't showing off how much money you can spend. It's knowing exactly how much freedom you own. You walk back to your office, completely locked into the long-term vision of structural dominance. Your holding company is secure, your investments are automated, and your tax strategy is perfectly optimized. You realize that the entire journey comes down to one single shift: moving from consumer to owner. The system wants you to stay a consumer forever, trapped in a loop of working, spending, and paying taxes. But once you break that loop and start acquiring true equity, the entire game completely flips in your favor. Now you are fully ready to look at the exact step-by-step blueprint to build this system from scratch. No matter where you are starting today, even if you have $0 in your bank account right now. Because every single multi-million-dollar structure started exactly right here at the absolute bottom. Forget the viral hacks, forget the shortcut gurus, and let's look at the actual math of execution. This is the 3-phase framework that will take you from a standard taxpayer to a structural wealth operator. Phase 1 is all about maximizing your active cash generation through high-income digital leverage. Let's break down exactly how you execute this without wasting years of your life making mistakes. If you rely entirely on a standard hourly wage or a fixed salary, you are playing the game on maximum difficulty. You have to disconnect your income from your time by building a highly scalable digital asset structure. You focus on creating high-leverage skills, things like media production, software design, or financial structuring. You build a business model that can sell to thousands of people simultaneously while you sleep. This active cash flow is the raw fuel for your entire wealth-building machine. Once that cash flow passes a healthy threshold, you immediately transition into phase 2, the structure. You don't wait until you're a millionaire to set up your corporate shields, you build them early to protect your growth. You draw a hard legal line between your personal identity and your income-producing business operations. This single move immediately lowers your personal liability and opens up the true business tax code. You start optimizing your operational expenses, ensuring every tool you use to build wealth is fully deductible. Then you enter phase 3, moving your retained corporate profits into hard, wealth-preserving assets. You don't speculate on volatile internet trends. You buy cash-flowing real estate and low-cost equity blocks. These assets generate quiet, passive distributions that carry massive built-in tax advantages. This is the exact loop: build cash flow, shield it through an entity, and lock it into permanent assets. When you execute this properly, you stop caring about what tax bracket the government announces next. You stop getting stressed out by every single standard economic downturn or media panic cycle. Because your entire financial foundation is built on structural reality, not on emotional speculation. You realize that true wealth is quiet, methodical, and incredibly disciplined. You show up every day to put another solid brick into the fortress you are building for your family. The system is always going to be rigged for the people who take the time to understand the rules. You can either spend your life complaining about the game, or you can finally learn how to win it. It requires you to drop the victim mindset completely and take absolute, radical accountability for your numbers. No one is coming to save you, and no politician is going to pass a law to make you rich. Your financial freedom is entirely your own responsibility, and the blueprint is sitting right in front of you. You look at the entire corporate system not as an enemy, but as the ultimate wealth-building tool. You automate the savings, optimize the entities, and keep your focus locked entirely on scale. You start tracking your net worth not by the cash in your wallet, but by the strength of your equity. You watch the entire system compound over time, faster and cleaner than you ever thought possible. You finally speak the true language of money, the language of structures, leverage, and real assets. The noise of the world fades away completely, leaving you with nothing but clean execution. You don't need validation from social media platforms or flashy displays to know you're winning. You just enjoy the pure, unadulterated peace of knowing your future is completely locked down. You look at every single financial obstacle as just another simple math problem waiting to be solved. You build the systems, manage the risk, and let the compounding interest do the heavy lifting. You've officially graduated from the amateur leagues of internet finance to true operational mastery. There are absolutely no hidden secrets or magical tricks left to uncover in this entire game. It just comes down to whether you have the discipline to execute the blueprint day after day. The top 1% win because they operate with absolute, flawless consistency over decades. You decide right now to match that level of consistency in your own daily financial habits. You stop looking for immediate gratification and start building for long-term, multi-generational freedom. You look at the road ahead with complete clarity, knowing exactly what steps you need to take. You wrap up your working session, completely satisfied with the foundation you've laid down today. You walk out of your office space, ready to engage with the real world on your own terms. You feel the quiet confidence of a person who finally understands the hidden engine of the economy. You look at the entire world around you through a completely different lens than you did before. The consumer traps lose all their power over your brain once you know what true equity feels like. You take a moment to review your milestones, ensuring your trajectory is perfectly aligned with your vision. Every single system is running flawlessly, generating value and shielding capital exactly as planned. You are no longer just a passive participant in the economy. You are an active, dominant builder. The entire playbook is now in your hands, and the next move is entirely up to your execution. Look, at the end of the day, the system isn't going to rewrite itself to make things fair for you. The tax codes, the banking laws, and the institutional loopholes were built by the people who own the assets. You can spend your entire life being angry about that reality, or you can choose to master it. The elite don't care if you understand their playbook. In fact, they prefer that you stay completely asleep. But the second you take the time to study the architecture of wealth, you pull the curtain back. You stop playing a defensive game against inflation and start playing an offensive game of accumulation. Every single decision you make with your next paycheck will either keep you trapped or inch you closer to freedom. True wealth isn't about status, and it's certainly not about showing off to people you don't even like. It's about buying back your time, protecting your family, and owning absolute autonomy over your life. You walk back out into the world fully equipped with the exact mental models needed to scale. You stop looking for immediate results and start falling in love with the long, quiet process of building. You realize that every single day is a massive opportunity to optimize your personal corporate holding structure. You treat your time like the ultimate non-renewable asset that you can never afford to waste. You sit back down at your control panel, completely insulated from the chaotic noise of the daily news cycle. You look at the numbers, you look at the strategy, and you execute with absolute robotic precision. The ultimate destination isn't just a massive bank account balance. It's the absolute elimination of financial fear. You have the holding companies, the asset allocation models, the tax shields, and the debt management rules. The blueprint is completely laid bare right in front of your eyes, and there are no more excuses left to make. The only variable left in this entire mathematical equation of wealth building is your own personal execution. You pull your keyboard close, you open the first document, and you officially begin your real asset build. No more waiting for the perfect timing, no more wishing for things to get easier on their own. You take the system exactly as it is written, and you turn it into your own private economic engine. The game of the top 1% is officially unlocked, and you are finally ready to play it to win. You take control of the narrative, you take control of the equity, and you never look back. Every minute that passes is now working directly for your future freedom instead of funding the system. You look at the skyline not as a distant, unattainable dream, but as a map of potential you can conquer. You focus completely on the task at hand, blocking out every single remaining distraction in the room. The structure is solid, the execution is unshakable, and the destination is completely inevitable. Remember, the wealth game isn't won by the loudest person in the room. It's won by the most structured. If you're ready to stop being the consumer and finally step up to become an owner, the path starts today. You have the strategies of the elites, the warnings of the pitfalls, and the exact phases to scale. You realize that the real work is never truly finished. It just evolves to the next level. You step away from the workstation and look at the actual financial empire you've built from the ground up. The legal structures are locked in, the assets are cash flowing, and your daily execution is fully optimized. You aren't chasing the next viral trend or looking for cheap financial shortcuts anymore. You are simply managing the system, analyzing the metrics, and scaling your fortress brick by brick. The economic system that once felt completely rigged against you is now working for you around the clock. You started at the absolute bottom, broke through every single trap, and finally secured total financial sovereignty. You step out into the world as a master operator, completely in control of your own permanent destiny. The playbook is executed, the foundation is unshakable, and the empire is completely yours.